My name is Paul Paulson. 14 seconds ago, I turned 40 years old. You see, my parents believed in omens, and they tried very, very hard, and according to the stories I've heard, my mother held off as long as she could to ensure that I would be born at exactly midnight. I have spent a great deal of time in my life pondering what my parents were thinking, or perhaps what they were on when they chose to name me Paul Paulson. I mean, the name is silly. I'm sure you'd agree. It makes as much sense as Michael Michelson or Brian O'Brien. I have not so fond memories of reading the National Enquirer in the 1980s. And I won't quite forget ever the article about the strangest names in America. I seem to recall second place went to Iona Hotel, and the winner was Dill Pickle, a man who claimed to love his name even though restaurants canceled his reservations based on what they perceived to be a childish prank. Ah, yes, names. Ponder. Maybe I ponder too much. Like the idiot down the road who named his twin daughters Trish and Trisha. 15 months later, had another daughter and called her Trishy. Perhaps I'm analyzing this too much. Perhaps I ponder the wrong things. However, since both of my parents died when I was 4 of a drug overdose, no surprise, I really have never been able to ask them, nor will I ever. However, what's in a name? I'm not here to bore you about the details of my late-night ponderings. I'm here instead to tell you about last Thursday, the worst Thursday of my life. The Thursday that I met Satan.
Paul Paulson, A Loser's Tale, written by Jackal Johnston and narrated by the author.
I woke up last Thursday, same as I always do, anywhere between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. I don't work. I haven't worked in 10 years. I wrote a couple of articles in the past. And those articles became books. And although the books didn't sell as well as I had hoped, they sold well enough for me to make a living on the royalties. Mind you, it's a meager living, but it's still a living. The television I own in the corner is 25 years old, perhaps older. The ghetto blaster beside the TV works just fine, aside from the tape deck on the right, not really playing tapes at full speed. I must say I'm incredibly happy with what I bought. It's unsophisticated, but so am I. I can't fathom anybody spending more than $2,000 on a television. To me, it makes no sense. I mean, if the television is flat panel, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from putting your finger through it. I happen to like my CRT television. I've actually fallen and hit my head on the screen 3 times in my life. And the only thing that's happened is the television slid back on the shelf by 3 inches. If that was a flat panel television, it would have broken and poured hot crystal all over my face. Why do I ponder these things? I don't know why I'm bothering telling you about televisions. I really have no love of them. I barely watch the one I have. I made breakfast that morning. Bacon, eggs, toast, blueberry jam. My doctor tells me blueberries have antioxidants in them. I'm not even sure I comprehend what that means. I'm not sure people who buy blueberries for the antioxidant quality even understand what antioxidant means. Everyone's terrified of toxins these days, but no one really knows where they come from. And everyone just does what's fashionable, or what Oprah tells them to do. At any rate, I doubt the jam was any healthier than strawberry jam, considering it only cost me 99 cents at the grocery store. I look at the ingredients on the side. Blueberries, sugar, 3 other things I can't pronounce. Maybe I should make it a rule, now that prostate cancer could possibly hit me at this age, to not eat foods that have more than 5 ingredients on them. Maybe I should get into the practice of not eating foods that contain ingredients I can't pronounce. Maybe. It doesn't matter. Breakfast was good. The walk down to the store wasn't bad. Guitar store. I don't play guitar, but I admire those who do. I bought a guitar once. I had every intention in the world of playing it one day, of learning. I always figured I'd put an ad in the paper, looking for someone between 15 and 19, with no job and no friends to come and teach me this thing. To sit with me for 8 hours a day, while I told them stories about what little I had done with my life. I thought. But somehow, I never got around to that either. Maybe I'm a procrastinator. Maybe I'm a coward. I'm really not sure. The store had brand new guitars inside, and guitar strings, sheet music, stands, amplifiers, speakers, cables. The clerk was stoned, again, as he always was. He believed that hemp cured everything. He believed that hemp would actually keep the planets in line if you blew enough smoke outside of the atmosphere into space. He must have been high when he told me that. I laughed when I heard it. I didn't understand it. I tried to explain to him that what he was describing to me was insane, but he smiled and offered me a donut. I took it. I ate it. It was chocolate. I don't even know why I went to the guitar store that day. I had no intentions of buying anything. I knew I had no intentions whatsoever of acquiring lessons. I wasn't even interested in hearing any of this guy's crazy stories about marijuana and the alignment of planets. I wasn't interested in hearing anybody else inside the place play. Then I realized I was here because I was bored. Having not worked for as long as I have, having lived off of these paltry paychecks that come in every week, I began to realize that my life was not amounting to much. Interestingly enough, to me, I didn't care, although I thought I should. I left the guitar store and went across the street to the flower shop. Strange name. Flowers by Alanti. Nobody who worked there was named Alanti. Alanti didn't mean anything in Italian or Portuguese, which the two owners seemed to be. Alanti didn't mean anything in Arabic or in Latin. The owners couldn't tell me why they picked the name, nor could they even tell me why they got into the flower business in the first place. The fatter one seemed to be allergic to flowers. He sneezed a lot. Perhaps it was pollen. I don't know. I think today I was feeling more enlightened than usual. It hit me that these gentlemen had been asking me a question, considering the first time I heard the question asked was 5 years ago. And they've asked the question every week since. "Are you going to buy something or what?" said the Portuguese man, whose name I never really learned. And that's when it hit me. I had been coming to this flower shop every week for 5 years, every Thursday, and never purchased a single thing. I was beginning to wonder if something was wrong with me. This is where I began pondering again. Is it time for me to get a job? Should I write something new and take it to a publisher? I mean, by my own admission, the works that I had published before really weren't that good. I'm not sure why they were purchased for the amount of money that they were. However, I'm not complaining about that particular aspect of my life. I'm realizing now that I should be complaining to myself about this aspect of my life. What kind of a man goes to a guitar store who doesn't play guitar? What kind of a man goes to a flower shop for 5 years and never buys flowers? What kind of a man doesn't really care about much around him? What kind of man am I? And this is where everything got turned upside down. Because that's when she walked into the flower shop. She was beautiful. 5'5", no more than 120 pounds. 36, 24, 36. Or at least that's what it looked like from where I was standing. Maybe I required glasses. Maybe I was intoxicated. Don't exactly know why I thought she was as beautiful as she was that particular morning. But for the first time in 7 months, I had acquired an erection. Why is it that at my age, I'm going 7 months between erections? That is odd, isn't it? That's exactly what I thought that morning. And I still think that now. If I think back to the ages of 14 to 21, erections came and went with the wind. Erections came and went with photographs, stimulating my optic nerves. Why am I speaking like this? This woman is making me drool. I wiped my chin. I couldn't speak to her. It had been so long since I had talked to a woman. I haven't been on a date since I turned 30. How embarrassing is that? I looked at the Portuguese man. I told him I'll take 1 rose. I don't even know why I said that. I bought a rose. I gave him $10. He went to give me change, but I left before I could get it. I went across the road to the cafe, wondering why it was I couldn't speak to that woman, and wondering why it was she was now walking across the street to come and see me. At least that's what I thought she was doing. She walked across the road without looking both ways, walked straight towards me, and sat down at my table. Looked at me. She said nothing. She took my rose. It was an expensive rose. It was almost $9. She took it and put it in her purse, without saying why. Then told me her name. Candy, she said, with an I. Why is it that we as men are so turned on by names that end with an I instead of a Y, when we know damn well that there is no point behind the I? It should be spelled with a Y. Maybe if it was spelled with a Y, I wouldn't have been as intrigued as I was that day. She then asked me if I was going to introduce myself. Yes, I said. I paused. My name is Paul Paulson. This was the first woman to not laugh when she heard the name. She told me my name was sexy. I got an erection again. Wow. 2 in 1 day. Moreover, 2 inside of the same 2-minute span. Was this a sign of things to come? Was my life about to get better? I had almost forgotten what it was like to have an erection. I haven't masturbated in 2 years. I haven't had sex in 12. When I really do think about it, I can't think of any good reason why that is, aside from I simply haven't tried. Some men who can't get chicks, as they say, go to prostitutes or beg their female friends to have pity sex with them. I was fully capable of doing both of those things. But I never did. Why? I don't know. What else does this woman have to say? Not much. She looked at me, winked, and walked away with my rose. That very expensive rose. Her buttocks was perfectly shaped. Oh my Lord, I have ejaculated. I have ejaculated in a public place, in my own clothing. I'm embarrassed. I'm going home to change and rethink my life. I'm realizing now, as I'm telling this story, I'm switching back and forth between first and third person. This day was especially confusing to me, which is why I really can't keep my thoughts straight. But I went home and realized just how much semen a human being is capable of expelling at any one given time. I can't believe the population of the planet isn't bigger, with the sheer volume of fluid that was pouring down my leg. I threw my clothes in the hamper. I knew at some point this week I'd wash them. I wasn't sure what day. Maybe Sunday. I sleep in Sundays. That's a bad habit, I know. Haven't been to church since I was 10, but I digress. The phone rang. I answered it. It was her. How did she get my phone number? My phone number is actually listed as Randy Stevenson. Randy Stevenson was the name I made up on the spot when I was talking to the phone company. I don't even know why I lied to the person I was talking to on the phone, but I did. And here she was, calling me, Paul Paulson. Why am I erect again? I know why. Because this woman's beautiful. I want to sleep with her. I want to do everything with her. But I can't really speak to her. When I think about the conversation from earlier that day, today, that day, I'm confused. I said nothing. And she took my rose. I tell her I'm fine. She asks me if she can buy me a steak dinner. I say yes. I met her at the restaurant. We sat down. We had a drink. She spoke. Probably 7 straight minutes. No more than 8. She talked a lot about how much she loved to mountain climb and how she used to skin animals on a native reserve, how she was taught how to make her own leather and gut her own fish. She liked the outdoors. It was nice to hear these stories. It was nice to have a conversation with a woman. I hadn't said much, so I don't really think what we were doing was conversing. I think it was more her telling a story to a silent man. However, the steaks arrived. The waiter apologized, to me specifically. He told me the chef had cut his fingers when he was preparing my steak, but it was okay. The chef didn't have HIV. I thought that was strange. I had never in my lifetime been told that my food had been bled on by a human being. I had never once in my lifetime had another human being reassure me that somebody else did not have HIV. I don't recall asking if the chef had HIV. I was repulsed. I only ate the potatoes. The woman asked me, "Didn't you like your steak?" I told her flat out, I was disgusted by the very notion that there was blood on it. She took the steak. She ate it all, without any concern for her own safety. This turned me on, and I don't know why. The waiter then came back. He told me I reminded him of somebody. Then he punched me in the face. It hurt. The last time I was punched in the face, I was 15 years old. The last time I was punched in the face, it was by a kid named Jason, who was 2.5 years younger than I was. Jason had earned the name of Bubblehead. Everyone called him Bubblehead. Except the one girl that he did like, who hated his guts. She called him Bubble Skull. I think it made her feel better that she had gone with a different word than everybody else. But Jason had earned that name 4 years prior. He laid claim that he was the first person on the planet to say the word Abaduda. I, of course, very foolishly, argued the point that it wasn't possible. With the sheer number of people on the planet, somebody had to have said it before he did. But he argued the point over and over again. I didn't really have the capacity as a child to comprehend when I was being a fool myself, and I argued with Jason for over 4 years about the fact that he could not possibly have been the one to have said Abaduda first. It wasn't possible in my mind. It was possible in his. He punched me in the face when I was 15. I then agreed that he was the first, and that was the last time I ever saw him. This waiter punching me reminded me of that stupid word. And that's all I could say to him was Abaduda. And I was very embarrassed by what I had said. I felt like crying. I didn't. The woman across from me simply smiled. Why is it that when I met this woman, silly things like this began to happen to me? I thought it was also very strange that nobody in the restaurant even batted an eyelash when I got punched. The manager didn't come over. The owner didn't come over. The head chef did not come over to apologize, either for bleeding on my steak or for his coworker punching me. I felt compelled to leave. But this beautiful woman across the table from me said, "No, stay. I'll make it worth your while." I don't know what she meant. I can only assume. Being a man, I assumed incorrectly, because I assumed it was sex. I had no idea what I was in for. We left the restaurant. My eye had gone black. I was in pain. I wasn't feeling very good about what had happened. But when I looked at the shape of this woman's body, all of that seemed to disappear. She led me into the back alley, where the waiter came out, looked at me, and handed me a plate of French fries. He said, "No hard feelings." And I said, "No, I don't think so." The plate of French fries was his way of apologizing. He had confused me with somebody else. He told me that I was very similar in appearance to the man who slept with his sister. He then told me that this had taken place when his sister was in her late 40s. Why it would matter to him at that point is beyond me, but I graciously accepted the French fries because the potatoes I had earlier did not fill me up. That beautiful woman we talked about slapped the French fries out of my hand before I had the fourth one of them. I don't know why she did that, but she laughed. And oddly enough, I got an erection. Again. That's a lot of erections for one day, and considering that nobody was touching my penis, I found it strange that it should be rising to the occasion, even when the occasion was a humiliating act committed against me by a beautiful woman. Maybe I had strange sexual fetishes that I knew nothing about. Since I hadn't really been sexually active for such a long time, and since I've lived my life as a coward, these are things I've simply never explored enough to know. It could be that I'm equally as strange as all those people that I have been calling strange in my life. The ones who eat feces, for example, and get turned on by it. I could be one of those, but I don't know. I've never tried. I've never asked a woman, "Would you please defecate in my mouth?" I don't think I would. I don't think I'm brave enough for that. Perhaps one day, though, I'll hire a prostitute. I'll ask her to do that and see if it works. If it works, I'll then have to decide if I'm going to submit myself for psychiatric evaluation. Again, I digress. My ponderings will just interfere with the story. We left the back alley and went down the street. As we began to cross the street, I didn't notice the large truck coming towards us at excessive speed. I tried to get out of the way. I almost did, entirely. I got lucky. The truck hit the heel of my shoe. I was wearing very unusual shoes. I don't remember where I got them. But the heels were slightly under 1 inch thick, and the truck had made an impact with that. I truthfully had no experience in martial arts or gymnastics, so I wasn't sure how to fall, but the sheer fear of being hit by that truck forced me to dive onto the street. I removed 4 layers of skin from both of my hands. They weren't bleeding profusely, but they were bleeding enough to be annoying. It wasn't a cut pain. It was more of a sandpaper pain. I remember my brother once took sandpaper to the back of my neck when I was sleeping. I don't know why he did it, but I bled for over 15 minutes, all over my favorite pillow and my security blanket. My mother threw them all out. I thought it was very cruel what he had done. This injury I had just sustained reminded me of that. When I looked up, I noticed a police officer. He was writing a parking ticket for a car parked on the side of the street. He didn't seem to notice or care that I was almost hit by a truck. When I asked him, did he see that, he simply turned to me and told me to get lost. He showed me the ticket he was writing. I thought it was odd. The ticket said $1,000, which I thought was excessive for a parking fine. I had heard of parking tickets in excess of $55, but I thought they were rare. $1,000 for parking on the side of the street? I looked around. I could not see a single no parking sign. What was he doing? I had never seen this before. Why had I been punched and almost hit by a truck in the same night? I didn't know. Candy pinched my ass. It felt good to be touched by a woman again. It felt very good. Again, I got an erection. That's 5 in one day. The police officer writing the ticket took out his nightstick and broke both headlights on the car. Again, I thought this was strange. Candy laughed. The officer looked at her, handed her his business card, told her to call sometime. She said she'd think about it. She kissed him on the nose. Again, strange. The officer walked away. We walked across the street, and I realized on the other side of the street, there was nothing there. All the shops were closed, and I simply could not remember any shops in this neighborhood being closed. What was going on, I thought. And then I thought to myself, it doesn't matter. This woman promised to make it worth my while. I'm looking forward to that part. But I've not been on a date in so long that I simply don't know what to suggest to her. What do we do next? I found myself unable to speak, not because I was completely impaired by my injuries, but I really had no idea how to talk to women. I really had no idea how to strike up conversations with people in general. In looking back at my life, people asked me questions, and I simply responded to them. Even when I went to a store to buy something, I had always waited for the clerk to say, "Can I help you?" Whenever I went to a restaurant, I always waited for someone to say, "What can I get you?" I've never spoken to anybody in my lifetime unless they've spoken to me first. That's strange. I'm starting to realize that now. I am a strange person. I always used to think of myself as normal. This woman, whether she meant to or not, has shown me that I'm not normal. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I just want her to make tonight worth my while. She takes me by the hand. We walk down the street. It gets darker, and now there are fewer buildings. What I find strange is that I have no recollection whatsoever of this town that I've lived in my whole life, not having buildings on this particular street. King Street is the name. King Street has apartments and low-income housing and low-rise housing, which extends for 14 kilometers east and west. As far as I could tell from where the steak restaurant was, we were almost directly in the middle of that street. There should be buildings 7 kilometers in each direction, but there aren't. It's dark. I'm afraid. I don't tell her that. A 40-year-old man should not be afraid of the dark. The night gets stranger, because now we're in a field. There's no fields around here. I seem to recall a lot of people discussing at length, ad nauseum, as they say, about how little parkland there is in this town. How terrible this town is that everything is concrete. But here we are in the grass, and she kisses me on the cheek. And I get an erection. That's 6 in one day. All of a sudden, I'm feeling a little braver. This time I reach out to hold her hand. She slaps the top of my hand, and as soon as she does that, I have a memory. One which I didn't even know was a memory of my own. I'm remembering being 12. I'm remembering asking a girl to dance at the school dance, which I never really enjoyed going to. She slapped me in the hand. I fell to the floor crying, humiliated, embarrassed, wanting to die. How is it that this woman is doing this to me? Why am I remembering ridiculous things from my past? Why am I remembering age 12? When I'm 40, in a field with a beautiful lady? Why is she holding my hand and then slapping it? What happened next terrified me. An airplane crashed, no more than 100 feet away. I don't know where it came from. It exploded. Debris went everywhere. Somehow nothing hit either one of us. I told her we should go look for survivors. She looked at me. She said, "Kiss me." I was confused. I didn't. I began walking towards the airplane. She slapped me in the back of the head and said, "Kiss me again." I couldn't. I don't think it was because of the airplane. I think it's simply because I'm a coward. I didn't know what to do. This time, my desire to cry came to fruition as real tears. She laughed at me. That made me feel bad. She then looked at me and told me, yes, we should go look for survivors. We did. There was nobody in the plane. No bodies, living or dead. I was confused, again. This was a confusing day. I seemed to be walking around in a state of confusion. I did, however, see something on the ground which piqued my interest, and I picked it up. It was a gold ring, with one diamond on top. She looked at it. I could tell she wanted it. What do I do? Again, I'm not very good with dating. I'm not very good with women. I'm not very good at communicating my feelings or my thoughts. I wiped the tear away from my eye, and I gave it to her. I then told her that we should turn this into the police and wait the required 14 days to see if anybody came to claim it, at which point it would become our property. But wait, why was I saying our property? I'm the one that found the ring. I should be using the singular, me, not we, because I still have no idea what this woman's intentions are. Aside from the fact that, in my mind anyway, she's promised me sex later in the evening. Here I go again. My tenses are confused. I'm confused. I apologize. My name is Paul Paulson. A plane crashed 100 feet away from me. There were no survivors. There were no passengers. We left. We found ourselves in the warehouse district. It began to look normal again. I still have no idea why we were in a field. I simply cannot recall ever seeing a field close to where I live. The truth is, at this point, I've even forgotten the name of the town I live in. It's not important. I'm too busy staring at this lady's curves. God, she's beautiful. Why can't I speak to her? Birds. Birds fly by. Many of them. I'm sorry. Birds flew by. Again, I'm telling you this story at a future time. 2 of them collide in midair. They die in midair. Their bodies fall dead in front of me. A 3rd one defecates on my shoe. I'm embarrassed, but I think I'm truthfully more angry than embarrassed. They are decent shoes. I lectured earlier about television sets and not spending money on television sets, but I do spend money on shoes. Partially because one leg is shorter than the other, and I was made fun of greatly as a child for that. I seem to recall playing soccer as a child. I wasn't very good at it. I ran in circles all the time. I don't know if it was because of my leg or my incapacity to focus on the task at hand. But what I did do is follow the chalk lines all the way around the soccer field. I'd run around the center circle. I would bunny hop to the middle dot. Usually I would take some of the chalk with my hand and apply it to my forehead like a native Indian. I would skip along the center line all the way to the boundary of the field, and I would follow that chalk line around. And then for some odd reason, I would run in circles, half on, half off the field. This annoyed my coach and the fellow players. The problem was the team I was on only had 10 players registered. For some odd reason, you had to have 10 in this league to play. We had exactly 10. The coach couldn't bench me for fear of forfeiting the game. This prompted me, later in the season, to buy better shoes. Keeping in mind my parents were dead, I had to go to my uncle for money. He drove a truck, a very big truck right across the country. Once in a while, he'd make me sit in the truck with him and go from coast to coast. I was bored. But either way, he came through once in a while, and for me, with the new soccer shoes in place that had a small insert on the left side, I now was no longer fascinated by chalk lines, but more the ball. I scored 1 goal in my entire soccer career. I don't know if career is the right word, considering I had to pay to play, and I was never paid to play. But either way, since then, I have always bought good shoes, and this bird feces on my shoe had now enraged me to the point where I was able to speak to this woman. I'm not comfortable with what I've seen here tonight, I told her. I really think it's time for me to go home. She laughed. We ran towards the warehouse district. Actually, it was more her running, her holding on to my arm, me following. Not by choice, really. Well, maybe a little. I was curious. I wanted to see why it was a beautiful woman like this was taking me to a warehouse district. We walked into the first warehouse we saw. From what I could tell, the color was green. That's not important. Inside of this warehouse was a tank. Not a water tank, but a military tank. I don't know what manufacturer or model number. I'm not very good with information like that. I'm not very good at most things. It took me 5 years to buy a rose. It would probably take me 20 years to learn the history of tanks. Again, that's not important. She opened up the top hatch and climbed in. I counted 4 seconds, tops. The engine had started. How does this beautiful petite woman know how to turn on tanks? How does this beautiful petite woman know there are tanks in my hometown? Why are there tanks in my hometown? She pokes her head out the top. She told me to get in, and I did. With a big smile on her face, she names every single gauge inside the cockpit. Do tanks have cockpits, or do they have driver's seats? Maybe they're chambers. Again, I don't know. I'm intrigued, more so by the fact that I'm in a tank than I am with her knowledge of the tank. But I have now come to the realization that I should be focused on everything she's doing, because she's picked up a slug or a round or a shell. I don't know what they're called either. It looks like a bullet. She puts it into a hole. She smiles at me. She kisses me on the cheek. I get an erection. That's 7. 7 in one day. She presses a red button. I hear a loud explosion. My ears ring. I realize that she's fired this very large bullet through the open door and into the field. I leave the tank. I'm terrified. I think of that police officer who was shattering headlights. I don't want him to shatter my head. I run outside. When I look across the road, the field we were in is no longer there. There's a donut shop. I can't tell the name because the sign is gone. It's been blown up by this large bullet. She gets out and tells me she's always wanted to do this. I can't help but think I've gotten myself into a lot of trouble, but for some very odd reason, I'm excited by what I've seen. I smile for the first time in a long time. My mind goes back to when I was 18. I realized the last time I had smiled was when I was 18. There is something wrong with me. Who goes 22 years without smiling? Well, I guess I do. And I remember what I smiled at. I took a firecracker. I believe it was called an M80. I don't know. It has a picture of a clown on the side. It's made of wax. It's red. The wick is green. It was about an inch long. I taped it to the back of a frog and lit the wick. I looked at the frog and I watched it explode. I smiled when I saw that the legs and the rear end of the frog was completely intact, but the front, including the head and eyes, were gone, obliterated, turned into mush. I have no clue why that made me smile when I was 18, but I do clearly now understand that was the last time I had smiled before seeing this donut shop incinerated by a woman that I can't stop looking at. I was expecting police sirens. There were none. I expected a fire truck. There was none. I expected to see people running around the streets, perhaps in Hollywood style, running, bent over with both arms covering their heads. There were none. Seemingly, we were the only two people on the street. I asked her what was next. She said, "Follow me." I did. I shouldn't have, but I did. We ran down the street for no more than a minute. When I turned around, the fire was out. There were no fire trucks putting out the blaze. It had just stopped burning on its own. Again, odd. But I was waiting for my reward, so I continued to follow her. She walked in the front door of the bank. Looking at my watch, I found it odd that the bank would be unlocked. It was 10:03 p.m. She walked right in the front door. 1 minute later, she walked out with a bag of cash, a large bag of cash. She asked me if I wanted some. I said no. I didn't want to go to prison. How did she do this? Why was the bank open? How could she possibly have lifted that much money on her own? My understanding from a friend of mine who did this for a living, that a large bag of cash could be up to 110 pounds. At the weight of 120 pounds, she was now carrying 91.7% of her body weight. And what impressed me most is she was doing it with one hand. I honestly don't believe that I could lift 110 pounds with one hand, and I outweigh her by at least 65 pounds. I'm not fat, but I'm not thin. I have no tone. I haven't worked out since I was 18. I think the last exercise I had was capturing those frogs I mentioned once before. I ran through the marsh, trying to catch them. I remember sinking in deep. It was difficult to swim. I guess a marsh has warning signs around it for a reason. It is impossible to swim in there. I did almost drown. The exercise I got was not just chasing those frogs, but also trying to kick myself free from the mud on the bottom. So the water didn't look that deep, but in reality, it was. It was past my waist. The mud made it worse. Maybe that's why I blew up the frog. I was angry. I honestly cannot remember why it was I was chasing the frogs in the beginning. But I do remember blowing that frog up. And now that I think about the fact that I smiled after doing so, I'm beginning to feel guilt. I haven't felt guilt in a long time. Mainly because I've not done much with my life. I've not interacted with enough people to hurt anyone enough to feel guilty about it. But I'm feeling guilty about something I've done 22 years ago. Why is that? Is it because this night is so strange? Is it because my loins are tingling with anticipation of sleeping with this woman? Did she mean it when she said she'd make it worth my while? I don't know. I ask her, what are we doing now? Candy says nothing to me, walks across the street, and goes into a bar. Not any bar. It's a strip bar. It's called the Brass Rail. Interesting name. I honestly don't know what it means. I follow her in. There are women, naked, dancing on the stage. There are men, all the way around the stage, staring at them. I believe that's what they call Perverts Row, or at least that's what I've heard. This is my first strip bar. I've never been to one before. I don't know why. I know that when I was younger, the people I used to hang out with paid good money for fake identification to allow them to go to bars like this. Why I never followed is actually a mystery to me. I find myself unable to answer the very questions I'm asking myself. She gets up on stage. She looks at both women. She rubs her beautiful buttocks on the thigh of the first one. She caresses the breasts of the second. She winks at all the men in Perverts Row. She kisses the second girl, deeply. I get an erection. That's 8. Wow. What is this woman doing to me? I've ejaculated once and been erect 8 times. This has never happened before. I suppose if I was less of a coward, it could have happened a lot more often. I could have been one of those men who married a beautiful woman that liked sex and had sex with her man 4 times a week. I've heard this more as a legend, more as lore. However, I can't believe that it doesn't exist. And if I was less of a coward, I could have had this at some point. Instead, here I am at age 40, witnessing my first strip bar, witnessing for the first time a woman bumping and grinding another woman, witnessing for the first time a woman kissing another woman. I've heard stories at the guitar store. The young men, very few of whom actually have pubic hair, describe these very erotic tales. I don't know if they're telling the truth, but I do know that they're discussing very erotic and sensual events that I have never thought of or experienced. What do I do? What is she doing? I don't know. She turns around and takes off her shirt. Then she takes off her bra. She has the most beautiful pair of breasts that I have ever seen. But wait, I realized one more thing. These are the first breasts I've ever seen. Well, the third set, because when I walked in, the two other women on stage were also nude. How is it took me 40 years to see female breasts? The odds are I did see a breast when I was a day old. I'm thinking my mother breastfed me, although I can't remember that far back. I wish I could, but I can't, so I have no point of reference. I have to clearly state that these are the first bare breasts I have ever seen in my life. Wow, that's 6 in one day. Or is it 3? When you're counting breasts, do you count them as a pair, or do you count them individually? They're called jugs, knockers, milk bags, milk containers, watermelons, gazoolas. You can pick anything. My understanding of the English language is any noun, pluralized and spoken with emphasis, can actually mean breasts. But either way, I'm extremely disappointed in myself for not making the effort to see them earlier in my life. Some of my friends lost their virginity when they were 15, others in their early 20s. But either way, they still had ample breasts around them, as my understanding of sex when you're a teenager, since I never had it, is that sex could be something as simple as both of you taking off your shirts and rolling around, making out for an hour. I'm not an authority on this. I really shouldn't be speaking to you as if I know about it, because I truthfully don't. What I do know is this woman is dancing with other women. This woman, who has blown up a donut store, is now sensually touching other women. She's allowing men in Perverts Row to touch her. They're touching her stomach and her thighs. I'm jealous. I shouldn't be. She's not my girlfriend. She's not my wife. She's not my lover. She's someone that I met earlier today. Someone who stole my rose. Why am I jealous? I don't like this feeling. It makes my stomach uneasy. It makes me as a person uneasy. But here I go again, talking about things that I know nothing about. According to the way I've lived my life, I truly am not a person. I exist. There was a glimmer of life in me, once when I blew up a frog, and twice when I wrote those books. But I seem to be inward focused. I seem to be inward bound. I've had a very terrifying night, which should, as far as I understand, be exhilarating to me. It's not. But at the same time, it is. And I can't explain why. And I can't explain why not. She jumps down from the stage. 10 men follow. Then 20. She comes over to me, and she rubs her breasts on my chest. She takes my shirt off, forcefully. She takes out oil. I don't know where she got it. She sprays oil on my chest, and again rubs her breasts on my chest. I get an erection, my 9th in the same day. Wow is all I can say. And when I'm saying wow, I'm somewhat embarrassed. I'm somewhat embarrassed that at my age, I can't think of anything cooler to say. And look at that. That's the first time I've said cool since I wrote that book. I know nothing. And I'm understanding that now. I know nothing about anything. And I know Not a thing about nothing. That makes sense to me, even if it doesn't make sense to you. She takes off my pants, and I'm humiliated, because as a man, the first thing I think of is the size of my penis, or in this case, the lack thereof. Every man is concerned about his penis. Every man is concerned that other men are going to see the size of his penis when it's not erect. I don't know why men, especially in the Western culture, think this way. It is strange. But every man, as I understand it, gets the shrinks. The shrinks are when your penis retracts into your body. I do remember reading a medical journal once that clearly stated 1/3 of the male penis is actually internal, and that when it comes to penis enlargement surgery, the first thing they do is cut the tendons that hold that 1/3 inside. I'm terrified of the idea of having surgery done on my penis to make it longer, equally as terrified as the idea of any of these men seeing my penis in this bar. But she stops before my underwear comes down past my pubic hair, and I'm thankful for that. She pulls my pants back up and tells all the men behind her, "Sorry guys, this one's with me, and I'm with him." And she drags me out of the bar very quickly. She kisses me on the cheek, and I get no, wait. It's still erect. This is the longest I've had an erection in my life. And now I point out to myself, almost aloud, that I am a virgin. I have not had sex with anyone, male or female, human or otherwise. I've had sex with no one. This is embarrassing to me. She seems to understand this. She seems to sniff this out on her own. She asks me, "Are you a virgin?" I'm humiliated. Or I was humiliated. I'm sorry. My tenses are wrong again, and I apologize. This was a bad day. This was a bad night. Back to the story. I was humiliated by her question. She tells me it's okay. She's taken the virginity of over 500 men. For some odd reason, this turns me on more, and my erection grows bigger. With all the talk of HIV and AIDS, this should sicken me, but it doesn't. Not like the steak. The steak sickened me. Her statement makes me want her more. I'm beginning to understand now what the priest in Sunday school was talking about. The temptation of Satan, he said. Be wary of it. Lust. Lust will be the end of you. Since I do not believe in heaven, and I do not believe in hell, I cannot fully comprehend what he was trying to say. What I do know is, I want to sleep with this woman. I'm remembering now, or at least at that moment I did remember, being 21 years old, walking through a very crowded hallway. I had a very unusual experience with my college professor. She wasn't attractive. She was fat. She was repulsive to look at from every angle. She had acne, even though she told me she was 35. I had once suggested to her that she try Minosin. She slapped me in the face and told me I should never point out another person's flaws. Strangely, however, in the hallway, when it was crowded, the fire alarm had been pulled. People were making their way towards the exits, in no big hurry. Nobody believed the building was on fire. And this very same ugly, acne-ridden, fat teacher decided to press her buttocks against my crotch and move it in a clockwise motion. I remember being repulsed, excited, stimulated, turned on, and embarrassed. On top of all of that, I loved what was happening, and I hated it all at the same time. I have no idea why she was doing what she did. She never told me. What I can say is, that was my first and only sexual experience. We were outside of the strip joint. 5 men followed. One of them challenged me to a fistfight. I don't know how to fight. As I mentioned, Bubblehead, who was 2 years my junior, punched me in the face and forced me to succumb to his argument that he was the first one to say, Abaduda. How do I defend myself? What do I do? The man is goading me into a fight. He's telling me I have no penis. He's telling me that he slept with my mom. My mom's been dead since I was 4. This hurts my feelings immensely. I tell him what he said is rude. He didn't care. Out of his pocket, he pulled something. I couldn't tell what it was. But I do remember being terrified beyond reproach. Is it right that a 40-year-old man is afraid of a fight in a street? I don't know. I'm not one to judge this, seeing as I'm the man who is 40 and afraid of this. I don't think I'm the right one to comment on it. Candy disappears. She's gone. I don't know which direction she went. I don't know if she's hiding. I don't know if she's so sickened by me and my lack of manhood that she's just left. This man punches me in the face, exactly in the same place as the waiter did earlier in the night. I fall to the ground. I hit both my knees. I hit my hands again, in the same place as I did before. The wounds that had not yet healed from earlier in the evening reopen, and this time I bleed profusely. I do the only thing I can think of. I remember what the waiter said to me earlier. I look at this man, and I tell him I have AIDS. I show him my bleeding hands. He runs away. He runs very quickly. The other 4, standing behind him, who are all encouraging him to fight me, leave as well. The one guy tells me I'm a fag. I don't know what that means, but I'm very happy to not have to fight this man. I'm also very happy to not have his friends ambush me, if they were his friends. I don't know. I turn around looking for Candy, and I'm very upset that she's not there. See, here we go again. My tenses are wrong. I was very upset that she had abandoned me. I began to walk home, but I realized the layout of the town had changed, or had it? Had I just not been paying attention to where I was? I had no clue where I was now. Was I in my own town? Or had she taken me elsewhere? I looked at my watch. It was 10 after 10. All of this took place within 7 minutes. How is that possible? I didn't care. I wanted to shower. It was obvious I wasn't going to sleep with Candy tonight. It was obvious that she knew what I really was. It was obvious that she knew that not even I liked me. I headed west, or at least that's the direction I thought I was going, but nothing looked familiar. Every cafe, restaurant, and bar that I tried to approach locked their doors the second I approached the door itself. Some of them even gave me the finger. They turned their open signs around to closed, and those who used electronic open signs simply turned them off. Have I been able to turn everybody off as much as I turn myself off? Were these signs being turned off some type of message from gods that I didn't believe in, trying to tell me that I was nothing and that I turned them off too? I didn't know. I sat down on the curb and I cried. This time I could not stop the tears at all. Paul Paulson, who was he? A guy who's never had sex. A guy who wrote 2 very awful books. A guy who accidentally fell into writing 2 awful books because the articles that were written that led into books were about esoteric subject matter that only one person on the planet appreciated. I'm beginning to doubt that anybody bought those books. I'm beginning to think that this one individual who liked the stories bought all the copies for the sole purpose of making me feel good about myself. I don't know if that's true, but I am assuming this, and I don't think I'm wrong. If that is the case, I owe this man a debt of gratitude and my life. Candy reappears. She got dressed in a beautiful gown. It's maroon. It has pearls across the bottom. It has pearls across the sleeves. It's held up by one strap on the right shoulder and no strap on the left. She's not wearing a bra. Her skin is beautiful. I love the way she looks in this dress. But how did she put this outfit on? And fix her hair? And put on those beautiful high-heeled shoes in the 2 minutes it took for me to sit down and weep like a baby? I don't know. She doesn't explain herself. I don't care. I'm happy again. She lifts the dress to show me her shoes, and something falls out of her dress. I look. I can't tell what it is. The shadow cast by the frills of her dress is blocking what this is. I touch it. It's warm. It's wet. It doesn't feel right. There's something wrong with what I'm touching. When I look at it, in the light, I vomit. I can't hold my stomach in. It's the same back end of the frog that I blew up all those years ago. Why is it in her dress? Why would she bring it here? I would have figured, until tonight that is, that particular piece of frog carcass would have decayed long ago, or been eaten by an animal that eats carrion, such as a bald eagle or a vulture. Since we're in the Western Hemisphere, it couldn't be another lizard. Or maybe it could. You never know. Some people purchase very large lizards, such as savanna monitors, or Nile monitors, and then release them into the wild because they think they're doing the right thing. It could have been consumed by one of those, but I doubt it. It's here in front of me now. A beautiful woman in a beautiful dress is showing me something I did wrong all those years ago. Why? I don't know. I cry again. She tells me not to cry. She tells me the frog forgives me. How's that possible? Frogs can't speak, especially dead frogs. It's impossible for a pair of frogs' feet to speak. This I know. The police officer who showed me the $1,000 parking ticket earlier in the night grabs me by the shoulder, tells me I'm under arrest for murder. He points to the frog with his nightstick. It's strange. I feel that I deserve this. I deserve to go to prison for what I did. My understanding of the law is that first-degree murder, like I had performed, will get you life in prison. He doesn't put handcuffs on me, and he does not read me my rights. Instead, he draws his pistol and points it directly at my chest. He tells me if he pulls the trigger, the bullet will tear through my heart, and all my blood pressure will drop to the point where I will die within 3 seconds. I figured if this ever happened to me, I would be afraid. But now I'm not. I feel I deserve this. Why do I feel so guilty about that frog? He pulls the trigger, and time slows down. I actually see the bullet leave the barrel of the gun. I see the smoke following the bullet and enveloping the officer's hand. I can move out of the way if I wish. It's moving that slow. But I didn't. I stood there, and I watched it enter my chest. It was a sharp, seething pain. I was once told that when bullets hit you, you don't feel the pain until 5 minutes later, when your nerves readjust, if at all. People have been known to bleed to death after having been shot, not knowing they were shot. Here I am experiencing sharp, seething, stabbing pain. I feel all the blood pressure in my body drop. I go cold. Completely cold. And again, I apologize. My tenses are wrong. It was a very emotional moment. I stood idly, expecting to fall and hit my head on the ground. But I don't fall. In fact, time goes backwards. The bullet leaves my chest. It goes back into the barrel of the gun. The officer looks at me and hands me a ticket. The ticket is for littering. A $50 fine. Tells me if I don't pick up the frog parts, that he'll write me another one. I comply. I picked up the frog and put it in the garbage. Candy looks at me and asks me why I put it in the garbage. I told her because I was told to. She then asked me if I did everything I was told, and I stopped again, and I thought back to the age of 8, where my very same uncle who drove that rotten truck told me what to do. He told me to put things in my mouth that I never should have. No, not his penis, but the end of a gasoline cap. He told me to suck on that. I'm beginning to realize why. He was one of those strange people with a strange fetish. His was watching children suck on large objects. I didn't understand that back then. I understand that now. I hate him for this. Candy tells me it's okay. Crying is natural. It's good I'm letting this out. She told me, once again, that she'd make this evening worth my while if I followed her one more time. I promptly stood up, and I did. I acknowledged the officer, and I thanked him very much for his patience. I thanked him very much for not shooting me. We walked away. Candy smiled. Her dress was still beautiful, but that frog's blood was still on her feet. Led me over to the nearest gas station. Interesting. I don't recall seeing a gas station on this corner. But as I mentioned before, I wasn't even sure which corner I was on. I wasn't even sure which town I was in. She asks me if I prefer unleaded or super. I don't know what she means, considering that we don't have a car. Considering I don't own a car. I've never owned a car. I don't have a driver's license. I've only been in a car 4 times in my life, and a train once. What is she talking about? I didn't know. She lifted the nozzle and began pouring gasoline all over the concrete parking lot. There was nobody inside the booth, which again I found strange. Normally there's at least one person, typically a teenager, working behind the counter at this time of night. But there was no one. The gasoline began to pool and began to follow me. Maybe I was standing at the lowest point of the parking lot, so I moved. And as I moved away, all the gasoline she had poured followed me. She then turned the nozzle towards me and completely doused me in gasoline. It smelled awful. It got in my mouth. When it got in my mouth, I threw up. When I threw up, I think I lost consciousness, because when I looked up, I realized I was lying on my back in the gas. Candy was looking at me with a smile on her face and a candle, a birthday candle embedded in a muffin as opposed to a birthday cake. I don't know what that represented. I don't know where she got the muffin. I don't know where she got the candle. And I don't recall her telling me that she smoked. I therefore did not know why she was carrying a lighter. She proceeded to hand me the muffin and told me to make a wish. I didn't know what she was talking about, and I panicked. When I panicked, I dropped the candle in the fuel, and everything around me lit up. My body was on fire. I was in pain. I think I went blind because I don't recall any visual after that. I just felt my skin peeling off of my body. I remember screaming. I remember crying. I remember even praying, even though I knew that I did not believe in God or heaven. I prayed. I prayed for the end of the pain. I prayed for the end of the night. Well, it would appear that I was wrong about praying and gods and heaven and hell, because simultaneously I had experienced them all. The hell of the night, the hell of being burned, and the heaven of waking up in my bed, realizing it was the next morning. I looked around. I ran to the bathroom. I peeled off my t-shirt and looked at my skin, the same t-shirt I had been wearing since I was a teenager. It had holes in the armpit and on the back. It was so thin you could pour water through it and not get it wet. There were no burns on my skin, and I could see I was in no pain, and I screamed. There she was, Candy, standing in the middle of my room. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. When I took my hands away from my face, she was gone, replaced with a pair of old soccer shoes. My soccer shoes. The ones that kept me from running in circles and playing with chalk. I look down at the table, and I see the pills I took last night, and I'm realizing that pills are not the solution to my problems. The only solution to my problem is to do something with my life. Being a 40-year-old virgin, being a 40-year-old, nothing, was too much to bear. I tried to end it. I took medications that were not prescribed to me. I took medications that were prescribed to someone else. I took a combination of medications. One to control heart palpitations. The other, an antipsychotic. Another was an experimental cancer drug. Another was headache medicine. I washed the whole mix down with cough syrup. Lots of cough syrup. I really can't remember how many bottles, but I do seem to recall the box of cough syrup I consumed weighing over 40 pounds, perhaps even 50. I tried to end it. It didn't work. Instead, I entered some kind of odd realm where I realized all of my mistakes. I'm here because of me, not because of anyone else. My uncle was a jerk. Bubblehead was a jerk. Other people I had come across had steered me wrong, but nobody had steered me more wrong than me. It was I who had to fix this. It is I who will fix this. It turns out that as a coward, I was even too afraid to die, and this particular time I'm very happy that I was as cowardice as I am, but no longer. Today, I'm going to have a shower. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to comb my hair. I'm going to put on my favorite shirt, and I'm going to put on an expensive pair of shorts. I'm going to put on my shoes, and I'm going to run to the field. And then I'm going to play soccer. My name is Paul Paulson, soccer player.
This has been Paul Paulson, A Loser's Tale, written by Kevin Jackal Johnston and narrated by the author. Copyright 2011, Kevin Jackal Johnston. Editing and audio direction by Mike Pernokis. Recorded in 2011. Learn more about Paul Paulson and other audiobooks at kevinjackaljohnston.com.